Once upon a time, in a quiet town where everyone seemed to know everyone else, there lived a young woman named Claire. She was 28, a school teacher, with tired eyes that carried the weight of unspoken memories. On the outside, she was gentle, soft-spoken, and dependable. But on the inside, she carried an ache she could never explain to anyone. Every morning, she put on her smile like armor, convincing the world she was fine, when in truth, she hadn't felt fine in years. Claire lived alone in a modest apartment at the edge of town. Her neighbors liked her, but she kept her distance, never letting anyone too close. That was her flaw. She was kind, but distant. She loved deeply in silence, but struggled to trust. And deep down, Claire feared that if anyone really knew her past, they would never look at her the same way again. On a rainy Thursday evening, after a long day of teaching, she came home to find something strange. A white envelope had been slid under her door. There was no name on it, just her address scrawled in rough handwriting. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked it up. She wasn't expecting mail. Inside, she found only one sentence written in black ink. "I know what you're hiding." Her heart stopped. She froze in the middle of her hallway, the words burning in her hands. No one should have known. No one could have known. That secret had been buried for years, and she had promised herself it would stay that way. The room around her felt smaller, the air heavier, as though the walls were listening. She tried to tell herself it was a prank, a cruel joke. Maybe one of her students had been testing boundaries. But no, this handwriting didn't belong to a child. It was jagged, desperate, almost unhinged. Claire dropped the letter on the table and paced the room. Her chest tightened as memories threatened to surface, memories she had spent years trying to lock away. That night, she barely slept. Shadows moved across her ceiling as the storm raged outside, and she kept hearing noises in the hall. Every creak of the building made her heart race. By morning, she was pale, exhausted, but determined to pretend nothing had happened. She tucked the letter inside her desk drawer and went to school, forcing a smile for her students. But as the day dragged on, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Every time she looked out the classroom window, she thought she saw a figure standing too long by the fence, or a shadow that vanished when she blinked. It was as if the letter had awakened something she could no longer ignore. But here's where things turned darker. Claire thought she could bury the past, but someone out there wanted her to remember, and soon she'd learn the truth. She was never really alone. After class, Claire stayed late grading papers, trying to distract herself. The sun had already dipped below the horizon when she finally left the building. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for a single car parked far in the corner, headlights off. She couldn't make out who was inside, but the shape of a figure sat still in the driver's seat. Her skin prickled. She hurried to her car, fumbled with her keys, and drove off as quickly as she could. Her hands shook on the steering wheel, but when she glanced in her rear-view mirror, the car didn't follow. Still, the unease clung to her like a second skin. That evening, when she reached her apartment, she hesitated before unlocking her door. Something felt wrong. She stepped inside carefully, flicking on the light. Everything seemed in place, until she noticed the envelope on her table was gone. Her breath caught. She had left it right there. Now, it had vanished. Claire's throat tightened, her mind spinning. Whoever had left that letter hadn't just been outside her life, they had been inside her home. And as she stood frozen in her apartment, she realized something chilling. The silence around her wasn't empty. It was listening. Once upon a time, in a quiet town where everyone seemed to know everyone else, there lived a young woman named Claire. She was 28, a school teacher with tired eyes that carried the weight of a painful past. One day, while eating cereal in her apartment, Claire found a letter slipped under her door. The handwriting was sloppy and the message chilling. "I know what you're hiding." A shiver ran down her spine. What was this about? She couldn't think of anyone who would send her such a threatening note. Then she remembered the secret from her past, the one she had buried for years, the one she feared could destroy her life if revealed. Could someone from her past have found out about her secret and come after her? Or was it just a sick joke played by some random person? Days went by and Claire tried to convince herself that the letter was nothing but a prank. But strange things began to happen. She started seeing a car linger in the parking lot near her school, and once she even saw someone she thought was watching her from outside the school fence. Her imagination, fueled by fear, began to paint all sorts of terrifying scenarios. One evening, Claire came home to find the threatening letter she had left on the table was gone. Someone had been inside her apartment. Who was this person? And what did they want? Had they come to hurt her? Was her secret no longer safe? Claire's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel her blood rushing to her head. Her hands trembled as she tried to call the police, but they didn't take her seriously. To them, it was just a silly, if somewhat creepy note. But Claire knew there was more to it than that. She just didn't know what. Days turned into weeks, and the cryptic notes continued to arrive. Each one was a reminder that someone was out there watching her, waiting for her to make a move. She felt trapped in her own life, never knowing when or where the next threat would come from. And so Claire lived in a constant state of fear, wondering who was behind the notes and why they were tormenting her. The truth was that her past was never truly buried. It was always there waiting to be unearthed. And now it seemed someone was determined to dig it up and use it against her. But what did they really know? And how far were they willing to go? One day, as Claire was sipping her coffee in the morning, lost in thought, she heard a knock on the door of her apartment. She was expecting a package, so she opened the door without any hesitation. But there was no one there. At the doorstep, however, she found a letter addressed to her in a handwriting she didn't recognize. The letter simply said, "I know what you're hiding." Then it disappeared. Claire couldn't help but shiver. Her first thought was that this must be some kind of a joke. But as the days passed, strange things started to happen. She began to feel like someone was watching her from outside the school fence. Whenever she looked up, she would see the same car lingering in the parking lot. It was a red sedan, old and rusty. One evening, Claire came home to find the letter she had left on the table was gone. Someone had been inside her apartment. The thought sent shivers down her spine. Who was this person? Why were they stalking her? And did they know about the secret she had buried all those years ago? The one she was so afraid would destroy her life if it ever came out? She tried to shake off the feeling that she was being watched. Surely it was just her imagination. But then one day, as she was walking home from the grocery store, she saw the red sedan again. It was parked just around the corner from her apartment building. Had the person from the letter been in the car? Was someone really stalking her? Or was she just being paranoid? As the days turned into weeks, Claire became more and more convinced that she was not alone. She began to see the same faces everywhere she went. She started to question if the walls around her were thin enough to hear her private conversations, or if someone was deliberately spying on her. She felt trapped in her own apartment, unable to relax or feel safe. The constant fear and anxiety took a toll on her, making her question if she would ever truly be free from whatever it was that was haunting her. Will Claire be able to uncover the truth behind the mysterious letter and the person who sent it? What is the secret that she is hiding? And how will her life change once the truth is revealed? Stay tuned to find out. And that's the end of the story. Please like, share, and comments below. So please click the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.